I thought I'd just give you guys each the opportunity to quickly riff on a couple of companies that you thought were interesting, that had the largest potential, and I'll start with you, Dan.
That's fantastic. Well, I say all this obviously, particularly as an expert in battery engineering, chemistry. So and obviously I've looked at all the Prieto blueprints and stuff before. I'll just run through them really quick, just snapshots on each. Pitch engine, as a journalist, there's way too, particularly as a blogging journalist who's writing constantly all day and looking for stuff to write about, there is way too much information coming in, not just via press releases, but via Twitter, et cetera. To me, I mean, I don't even know if it's a holy grail, but if I could feel confident as a journalist that there was a singular place, at least where I was getting most of my information, if that can get done, or at least most of the information that was coming to me from companies or from people who were quote unquote pitching instead of 30 different sites and people with their own blogs, I think that's got real potential. Obviously the business model is to get money from the companies who are trying to get their message out there, but from the end user, which would be me, I think, or I'd be one of them. I think there's huge potential in that. The other one is Prieto. I'm from Boston, even though the thing says I'm from somewhere in Colorado. I'm from Boston. We've got A123 in our backyard, which has obviously been a big hit. The question I have for Prieto is, if it works, it's fantastic. The big question I've gotten, it's been a question for A123, is what are the cap requirements, but from a venture perspective or private investment perspective, can it become, can there be a good ROI? I mean, A123 is a company that a lot of people look at as a huge success because it's got a, $2.2 billion market cap now. But it's also a company that if the federal government hadn't stepped in, if there wasn't a stimulus, might not actually be around anymore. It might literally be out of business. And it's it's a great concept. The question is, can it work for the people who are ultimately going to have to find it? But yeah, those are the two that jumped out at me.
Okay.
Hello.
Any thoughts?
Sure. I happen to be in the throes of writing a green investment piece, and being Barrons, I'm talking to mutual fund managers that are looking at the space. So it's interesting from their perspective, and one portfolio manager in particular, John Segerich at Gabelli, his largest category is the thing he calls efficiency. It's very broad and general, but it's his way of looking at these companies. And what struck me as interesting was Hydraulic as being a company that would fit under this very broad term of efficiency. If they can do that, it's a very practical thing that can be applied today. It's not a future technology, may not even be driven by any kind of government regulation. So from a go-to-market investable position, I thought that had some potential. Regarding batteries, I can only echo some of Dan's comments. I got to test drive a Tesla. Maybe some of you own one. In my early reporting a couple years ago, that was the big issue. Where do you get your batteries? And they said, we're not going to worry about the battery. We're going to let somebody else worry about the battery and figure that out. Well, clearly someone's taking that initiative. But to Dan's point,
but they'll go public first.
to Dan's point, that's an industry that is probably going to be driven by government regulation and policy. Again, that kind of investment is so unlike information technology or telecommunications or things that we're very familiar with, because it's not being consumer driven. It will need assistance. And then there's the whole element of where are they going to be produced, at what cost, and by whom, and will China knock them off immediately thereafter? So interesting, great that they're doing it, but it seems like there's just a lot of issues out there. Regarding social media and public relations, again, as a journalist, anything that would make that bring social media to the journalism community in some organized fashion that made sense would seem to have value, but I'm not sure how that model works. I didn't really understand exactly. I would have to talk to them more, have a better understanding of what the customer relationship would be, what things and services they really would provide, and so forth.
And to me on that one also, I guess I should follow up. And I just don't know this. What are the legacy players, the PR Newswire, the Business Wire, et cetera? What are they doing or not doing to incorporate social media? What's their version, whatever, 5.0 for them? I assume they're looking at this. I just don't know what it is.
So I'm curious specifically to your reaction to Grogger and the idea of crowdsourced content. I thought you might have a reaction to it.
Yeah, I do. There's obviously a fine line between crowdsourced content and being an aggregator. One thing I didn't get, and actually you might know the answer to this, is a simple linking question. In other words, which is if somebody, for example, you've got your Grogger thing up and you're pulling from all these blogs and one pops to the top for whatever reason, when somebody clicks on, do they end up, is it within your site still, or does it literally go to wherever that is?
So they're contributing content to the publication.
to
So
your
it
publication.
stays on the publication. Yeah.
Which obviously, is, as a publisher, raises the big question, which is, we make our money. I mean, I make a lot of our money on subscriptions, but in general, bloggers make their money, or professional bloggers make their money on links coming to their site. And there is obviously major pushback from bloggers about, I mean, look, the good example of this is Business Insider, which doesn't even do it as an aggregator. It just copies and pastes giant pieces, almost entire articles that we write, and just put them online. It's wonderful that they put our byline on it without asking us, but nonetheless, it doesn't help us financially. To me, that's the big question with Grogger is, would there be pushback from the professional bloggers who is their target segment who are saying, how am I recognizing revenue off of this? Because ultimately, I'm the one providing the content.
Okay. So just switch gears real quick and ask you, in terms of the region here and how it's viewed outside, how do people view this region? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Maybe Mark, I'll flip that to you.
Well, anybody who's spent any time in Silicon Valley, there's a certain arrogance there, for lack of a better word. And I've often asked the question, what they thought about these other areas, not just the Rocky Mountain region, but also whether it's the Sun Belt or Texas and other places like Austin. And they always give you the same answer. You've all heard it in the room that, well, we have the highest concentration of engineering and talent. And this is the place you have to be, and this is where you have to build your companies. And it seems to me that over time, this is being proved otherwise to a degree. And you specialize in it, so Dan knows much more about it than I. But given a chance, it seems like anybody that really understands what you're doing here, really pays attention, appreciates what's being done in the region. But I'm afraid that's still a minority, at least among the VC. And I'm not a venture capital specialist, and I interrelate with them on a regular basis, but not as a person who covers the industry. But I always found that interesting, because it seems like with so much talent and good universities all over this country, and not to mention lower costs of doing business, where you can launch companies and not have to deal with the obstacles of cost that you have in California, it just seems like a logical place to do business.
Yeah, I mean, the education thing's interesting. I learned dinner last night that I guess the Colorado, and Don taught me that Colorado, I guess, has the second most educated workforce, at least in terms of bachelors, next to Massachusetts. So I'm glad that we're still leading in something. But, and that should matter. To me, it ultimately, though, I think comes down to, can you get, every sector is different. So obviously, big aerospace here, getting very strong in clean tech. When it comes to IT, which obviously is what some of these companies presenting were, the big question is always, can you get a couple big core companies that not only raise the profile, but also create tons of spin-outs? I mean, how many companies in Silicon Valley are either created by people who used to work for Google or have been funded by angels who used to work for Google? And I mean, that's an issue in Boston also, that we don't have those many at least, of those big IT things. But on the other hand, you do have things like TechStars that, that have started here. I think Colorado, kind of Denver, Boulder, has gotten a pretty good reputation. I don't think it's considered the top entrepreneurial spot in the country. That's still obviously the Valley, and I think I kind of see it really as falling into that second tier, which kind of seems to be moving around a bit, whether that be Boston or New York or Research Triangle Park for life sciences or San Diego for life sciences. And I think they all kind of flip depending on what the sector is. But I think this area is right in there.
Thanks for the TechStars shout out. So in the interest of staying on time, I'll just thank the panelists and thank the presenters as well. I think those were all great. So another quick round of applause for them.